Ashtatarashata Shri Srimad, His Divine Grace, Abhay Charanavinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajakaacharya Ashtatarashata Shri Srimad, His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj Prabhupada ki Jai. Samavita Gaur Bhaktivrinda ki Jai. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai. Jainitai Gaur Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. This morning we are reading from 3rd Canto, chapter 15, Description of the Kingdom of God, text 16. Please repeat. Yatra naishreyasam nama vanam kama dugair drumai sarvartu shribir vibrajad Kaivalyam iva murtima Yatra naishreyasam nama Vanam kama dugair drumai Sarvartu shribir vibraja Kaivalyam iva murtima Yatra naishreyasam nama Vanam kama dugair drumai Sarvartu shribir vibraja Kaivalyam iva murtima Yatra naishreyasam nama Vanam kama dugai drume Sarvartu shribir vibrajat Kaivalyam iva murtimat Yatra naishreyasam namo Vanam kama dugai drume Sarvatu Shibir Vibraja Kaivalyam iva murtima Yatra in the Vaikuntha planets Naishreyasam auspicious Nama named Vanam forests Kama Dughai yielding desire Drumai with trees, sarva, all, ritu, seasons, shribihi, with flowers and fruits, vibrajat, splendid, kaivalyam, spiritual, eva, as, murtimat, personal. Translation purport by His Divine Grace, Abhay Charanavinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Translation. In those Vaikuntha planets, there are many forests which are very auspicious. In those forests, the trees are desire trees. And in all seasons, they are filled with flowers and fruits because everything in the Vaikuntha planets is spiritual and personal. Purport. In the Vaikuntha planets, the land, the trees, the fruits and flowers, the cows, everything is completely spiritual and personal. The trees are desire trees. On this material planet, the trees can produce fruits and flowers according to the order of the material energy. But in the Vaikuntha planets, the trees, the land, the residents, and the animals are all spiritual. There is no difference between the tree and the animal, or the animal and the man. Here the word murtimat indicates that everything has a spiritual form. Formlessness, as conceived by the impersonalists, is refuted in this verse. In the Vaikuntha planets, although everything is spiritual, everything has a particular form. The trees and the men have form, and because all of them, although differently formed, are spiritual, there is no difference between them. Om Jnanatimrandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guru Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapatakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriya Vancha Kalpaturubhyasya Kripa Sindhu Bhevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Thank you for coming this morning, Srimad Bhagavatam class, after last night's mega Vyas Puja. The biggest Vyas Pujas of the year, I think, in Sydney at least. His Holiness Jayapataka Maharaj's Vyas Puja. So, before we dive into the purport, I thought of just bringing out a very interesting point, very pertinent point. If you will remember, just some verses ago, we were talking about a darkness which was enveloping the whole universe. And prior to that, we heard about the act that Kashyapa and Diti performed at the inauspicious time. Now from that, how did we go to all of a sudden hearing about descriptions of the kingdom of God, about Vaikuntha? It seems like it's a very big jump, right? So I just want to talk about this issue of cause. In Sanskrit, cause is known as karana. Krishna is known as sarva karana karanam, which means that he's the cause of all causes. Srila Prabhupada would often bring out this point of, well, he would say two different causes. Maybe you've heard of it. In English, he would say efficient cause and immediate cause. Efficient cause and immediate cause. Sometimes the immediate cause he will call as a material cause as well. So here we see darkness. What is the cause of that? For example, if I take a clay pot, right? Now I could say the cause of that clay pot is the clay itself, right? If the clay is not there, I can't have a clay pot to make, to mold the clay and to make. So that clay is known as the material cause. In Sanskrit, the material cause is known as the upadan karana. The efficient cause is known as the nimitta karana. So the upadan karana, or the material cause of the clay pot, is the clay itself. The nimitta karana is something which is sentient, it's something which is conscious. So what do you think the nimitta karana of the clay pot would be? What would you say? The potter, right? So both of them are causes. The potter is the cause of a beautifully constructed clay pot, and at the same time, the clay itself, the material clay, is also cause for the clay pot to be made. So there's two causes. The material cause, the upadan cause, is the clay, and the nimitta cause, you could say the original cause, the cause which is separate from matter, is the potter himself. Why? Because the potter is alive, he is sentient, he is conscious. Same thing, Srila Prabhupada would sometimes give the example of electricity. Right? Electricity is We just turn on a light or we plug something into the power socket and it starts to work, the motor starts to spin. So the upadan cause or the material cause is the electricity coming out of the power point. That is why, a mixer or a food processor is turning, is rotating, because the electricity is coming out of the power point. But the nimitta cause, the efficient cause, is that somewhere far away in some power station, there is some electrical engineer and he's powering the power plant. That's the nimitta cause. Take, for example, the Bhagavad Gita, or let's say the Battle of Kurukshetra. If someone mundane, let's say a mundane historian, if they actually believe the Kurukshetra war happened, that's a very important point, it's not a metaphor. Let's say if they analyze the Battle of Kurukshetra, now they will say that it is because of Arjuna, it is because of the Pandavas that their side won. Of course, we as devotees understand why the Pandavas won. They won because, exactly, Krishna was on their side. That is the only reason why. We see Krishna is saying in the Bhagavad that I've just glanced at these vast armies which have gathered here, and just by glancing at them, I've reduced the duration of their life. So the effect is that the Battle of Kurukshetra has been won by the Pandavas. Now, if you analyze the situation from a mundane perspective, you'll see that the upadan karana, or the material cause, is that, yes, it's because of Arjuna, it's because of the Pandavas, that the Battle of Kurukshetra was won. But the nimitta karana, why did the Pandavas win? Why did Arjuna win? Why did he kill so many warriors? Who is empowering him? And that is Krishna. So most often that's why Krishna is known as the Sarva Karana Karana. That's referring to Krishna as the nimitta, as the efficient cause. Just like in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, nimitta matram bhava savya sachin. Just be a cause, just be an instrument in my hands, Arjuna, to win this battle of Kurukshetra. Actually, I've already desired that Duryodhana, Dhritarashtra and his cohorts, all the Kauravas which have assembled here, they're going to die. Just be an instrument in my nimitta, in my original cause of killing all these different people. Now that we understand nimitta karana and we understand upadan karana, now we can understand what's happening here. And this is the glory of Srimad Bhagavatam. Why is this darkness enveloping around the universe? If we analyze the situation from the material platform, from the upadan platform, from the immediate platform, we will say that we just read in the previous chapter that Diti and Kashyapa, they united at an inauspicious time. And, at that time, Lord Shiva was going through the sky with his followers. And then because they did it at that time, he was offended. And as a result, two of his ghostly followers, namely Hiranyakshipu and Hiranyakshipu, they entered into the womb of Diti. And you won't be wrong by saying that. That is true. But that's only the partial truth. It's only the upadan karana. Meanwhile, in Vaikuntha, what we don't know, now this is the nimitta karana, this is the original cause for why the darkness is coming. Meanwhile, in Vaikuntha, what's actually happening is that the four Kumaras, or let's say in Brahman first of all, they're actually wandering through Brahman. They approach the gates of Vaikuntha, and who stops them there? Jai and Vijay. And they say, look, we're great sages, we're Brahmanas, we want to come inside Vaikuntha. And Jai and Vijay, they stop them. And then what happens? The four Kumars, the Chaturasana, they curse Jai and Vijay. We curse you because you're finding duplicity in Vaikuntha where there should be no duplicity. They're finding duplicity. This person should come, this person should not come. They say, because you're finding duplicity in Vaikuntha, and remember, they're Brahmavadis, so for them everything is one, right? Everything is Brahman, like that. So they're saying, because you're finding duplicity in Vaikuntha, in a place of liberation, therefore you don't deserve to stay in Vaikuntha. You should come down to this material world. So they get cursed. And then we know the whole pastime, the very sweet pastime. Lord Vishnu comes running out, or rather Narayan, he comes running out. And he says that, no, don't do this. I'm even ready to lop off my hand. But then he gives his servants, Jay and Vijay, two options. Either you can come down for 7 births, I think it is 7 births, as my devotees in the mature world. Or if you want to expedite, if you want to quicken the process, you can come in this mature world and take 3 births as demons, as Rakshasas. Hence, their first birth is here in the womb of Diti as Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakshipu. So this is the Nimitta Karana. This is the actual original reason why there is darkness in the universe. But if we just analyze it from the mature platform, we'll say, yeah, it's because of what Diti and Kashyapa did. So yesterday Srikant Sen Prabhu was also mentioning about that, how materialistic people, scientists, etc., they'll just analyze this mature world from that platform, from that Upadan platform. But they'll say, for example, the cause of the universe is some big bang, some explosion from a point of singularity. But how that came about and why that came about, it cannot be explained unless we see things through the Shastra. That's why Shastra Chakshush, using Shastra Praman, is so important, because Srila Prabhupada says that this knowledge is apurushaya. Knowledge is apurushaya. And also Yamaraj says, Dharmam tu sakshat bhagavat pranitam. Right? That real religious principles are not enunciated by materialistic people, like mundane people, human beings. Real religious principles actually come from Krishna. And we can see also the glory of Lord Brahma. When the demigods are approaching Lord Brahma and they're asking Lord Brahma, dear Lord Brahma, our position is, being compromised. There's darkness coming in this universe. Why is it coming? Brahma doesn't immediately answer their question. He starts by describing the kingdom of Vaikuntha. What sort of an answer is that? So why is there darkness coming? And Brahma starts glorifying Vaikuntha. The ground there is Chintamani. The denizens have 4 arms, they're blue, and there's the buildings made of lapis lazuli and all these things. And they must be thinking, darkness is coming, and Lord Brahma is talking about Vaikuntha. Shriya Kanta Kanta Parama Purusha Kalpataravo Dhruma Bhumishchintamani Ganamayi Toyam Amritam Kataganam Natyam Gamanam Api Vamshi Priyasaki Chidanandam Jyoti Param Aswadhyam Api Cha Sayatra Kshirabdi Sravati Surabhibhyascha Sumahan Nimesharda Kyavana Vrajati Yatrapi Samaya Bhaje Shweta Deepam Tamaham Niha Golokam Ityam Vidantaste Shanta Kshira Virala Katipaya. This is the end verse of the Brahma Samhita. It doesn't follow that meter, that traditional Brahma Samhita meter. But Lord Brahma is summarizing his prayers by giving a very beautiful description of the kingdom of God. Shriya Kanta Kanta. He's mentioning that in Golok Vrindavan, Lord Krishna is worshipped by Shriya, which is the goddess of fortune. Kanta Kanta, in a very loving way, in that Madhurya, in that Ujjvala Ras, the very bright Ujjvala Madhurya Ras. It's distinct from Vaikuntha. The Lakshmi is in Vaikuntha and the Lakshmi is in Golok Vrindavan. Comparatively speaking, it's much more sweeter. The gopis and their dealings with Lord Krishna is much more sweeter than Lakshmi and her dealings with her husband, Narayan. Paramapurushu Kalpa Taravo. This is what's being described in today's verse, that in the Vaikuntha planets there are many forests, and in those forests there's Kalpadruma, there's desire trees. So there's desire trees. If there was desire trees here in the mature world, what do you think we would do? We would exploit, right? Fulfill my desire, get me this, buy me that. I mean, not buy me that, but just give me that. We would exploit. But in the spiritual world, in Vaikuntha, in Golok Vrindavan, people don't have the exploiting mentality. If they ask anything at all from a Kamadhenu or a kalpavriksha, they ask it for the service of Krishna only. And therefore, kalpavrikshas only exist in the spiritual world. Krishna knows not to keep them here, otherwise we would use them for our own sense gratification. Then he says, Katha ganam natyam gamanam api vamshi priyasaki. Katha ganam means, katha means to speak. Ganam, when they speak in Vaikuntha, they sing. Natyam gamanam. Gamanam means to walk here and there. But they don't just walk here and there. Natyam means they dance. When they go from one place to another place, they dance. Toyam amritam, Krishna says in the Gita, he's the taste of water. You can really experience that in the Vaikuntha planets, because according to Lord Brahma, the water, the toyam there, patram pushpam phalam toyam. The toyam there tastes like amrita, tastes like nectar. And api vamshi priyasaki, Krishna's constant companion is the vamshi, the flute. Sayatra kshirabdi sravati surabhibhyasya sumahan. You know, we read in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam that when Yudhishthir Maharaj, he was ruling. That time, he was such a pious ruler that everything was really going on nicely. The cows were so happy in his kingdom that they were muddying the fields with their milk. So in the same way, in Vaikuntha, Sayatra Kshirabdi Sravati Surabhibhyasya Sumhan, the cows, the wish-fulfilling Kamadhenu cows, are always joyous, happy. Their udders are always full of milk, and the whole Vrindavan is being, just washed away by their milk. Nimesha ardhakyuvana vrachati yatrapi samaya. The effects of time are conspicuous by their absence in the spiritual world. Half a moment can seem like lifetimes in the spiritual world. And also, a very long period of time can seem like so less. For example, when the gopis are dancing with Krishna, then that small amount, that time that they spend with Krishna, even though it may be for so long, for them it seems like it's just very little. And when Krishna is gone away from them, he may be gone away just for a moment of a second, a fraction of a second, but for them it feels like Krishna is gone for yugas. So time works differently there in the spiritual world. And also, of course, the effects of time in this material world is that it degrades the body, it deteriorates the body, we get old, we die, we get diseases. All these things are absent in Vaikuntha. So he said, Vidantaste shanta kshirala virala viraha katipaya. This is how the spiritual world is described by Lord Brahma and all the great acharyas. So I thought that was an important point to just put forward, that the vision that Bhagavatam gives us is completely different. We are always looking and judging things and making sense of things just on the upadan, on the material platform. But beyond that, Krishna is orchestrating everything, especially for devotees. And sometimes it takes us a long time to realize that, when I look back in my life, I realize Krishna's hand. Right? When you look back in, after you spend years in Krishna consciousness, then you look back and you think, wow, I can see now how Krishna guided me at each step, how Krishna's reciprocation was there at each step. We should pray to Sri Sri Radha Gopinath to give us that vision, to be able to understand how they are reciprocating with us at each time. And that will increase our faith in Krishna consciousness. Excuse me, Mataji. The next point I wanted to discuss is what Srila Prabhupada is talking about in the purport. He's talking about personalism. In the last sentence of the translation, it says, in those forests, the trees are desire trees, and in all seasons, they're filled with flowers and fruits, because everything in the Vaikuntha planets is spiritual and personal. Now, generally it's mentioned, okay, let me ask you a question. Generally speaking, what is the first lesson that we learn in Bhagavad Gita? Yeah, what is the verse? You're not the body, you're not the soul. What is the verse? The Sanskrit verse. Yeah, can you recite? Yeah. Tenosminita dehe kaumaram yovanam jara. Tata dehantaras prapti dhiras tatra namuyati. The sober person is not bewildered by such change. This is verse 2.13. And yes, we can say this is the first lesson, solid lesson that we learn in Bhagavad Gita. But if we were to critically or technically analyze it, that is actually not the very first lesson we learn in Bhagavad Gita. Who knows the verse before that? 2.12. Na tvevaham jatu nasam na chaivan neme janadipa. Then na tvevam jatu nasam na tvam neme janadipa na chaiva na bhavishyamah sarve vayam ataparam. Krishna is telling Arjuna that you, me, all these kings which have assembled here on this battlefield ready to fight, we have always existed, are existing, and will continue to exist as eternal individual personalities. Then in 2.13, Krishna explains why that is. Why that is because you're a spirit soul, you're not the body. And therefore at the time of death, don't be bewildered. So actually, technically speaking, the first lesson in Bhagavad Gita is not you're not the body, you're the soul. It's you are an eternal individual. This is the first lesson. And this is exactly what Srila Prabhupada is talking about here in the purport. That in the spiritual world, the trees and the men have form, and because all of them, although differently formed, are spiritual, there is no difference between them. They're all eternally individual spiritual beings. And it's highly recommended if anyone wants to see Srila Prabhupada's arguments that he presents for that point, that liberation means not merging into Brahman, but it means that we are eternally individual. Please read the purport to Bhagavad Gita 2.12. There's 3 or 4 main arguments that Srila Prabhupada lists there. I believe it's from Ramanujacharya's commentary that he's taken these points. So our acharyas, they explain that if Shankaracharya came before us, then we as Vaishnavas, or even budding Vaishnavas, we should offer our full Dandavat pranams to Shankaracharya. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains that Shankara is known as an acharya. Now if you read Srimad Bhagavatam 11th canto, there Krishna is saying, Acharya mam vijaniyan navamanyeta karhichit na martya buddhya suyeta sarvadevam mayo guru. This is the definition of an acharya. And Shankara is called an acharya, is known as Shankaracharya. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu referred to him as Shankaracharya. So what does it mean by acharya? Acharya mam vijaniyan. Vijaniyan means you must know. Acharya mam. Krishna is telling, you must understand the acharya to be exactly like me. Navamanyeta karichit. You should not see the acharya in any other way. That means Sakshat dharitvena samasta shastre uktasata bhavitayava sadbhi. Right? That means that this acharya or the guru is to be seen exactly as Krishna, in the sense that he's exactly representing the will of Krishna. So we may ask, how is Shankaracharya representing the will of Krishna? We may have that doubt, right? Because his followers are not following the Bhagavad philosophy. They don't believe that liberation is ultimately going to Vaikuntha. They believe it's merging. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he breaks down the analysis. He explains, obviously we understand that Shankaracharya is Lord Shiva, but he explains, he goes to the extent, and this is very important, he goes to the extent of, I think I was mentioning this some weeks back, he says that Shankaracharya actually laid the foundation for which later on, Vaishnavacharyas like Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, they built a great palace of Vaishnava Dharma, for which the foundation was originally laid by Shankaracharya. How is that? He points out 3 things. He says in Shankara's Brahmavad philosophy, and it is Brahmavad philosophy, it's not Mayavad philosophy. In Shankara's Brahmavad philosophy, and if you compare that to Vaishnava philosophy, Vaishnava Siddhanta, both of us, we understand that there is a difference between matter and spirit. Right? The followers of Shankaracharya and Vaishnavas, we believe that there's a difference between matter and spirit. Then, we say that real mukti or real liberation means to free ourselves from matter and go to something spiritual. Of course, we believe that is Vaikuntha, whereas the followers of Shankaracharya, they say that is Brahmajyoti. But still, that principle is there, that we have to free ourselves from matter, and liberation means, mukti means, to go to something spiritual, some spiritual goal. That's the second point which is common. The third point which is common is that we as Vaishnavas, we understand that to go to that spiritual goal, we need to worship the Lord, Krishna, Vishnu. Now here's the important thing. Shankaracharya also advised his followers to worship the Lord, to worship Lord Vishnu, to be able to get their Sayuja Mukti. However, they worship Lord Vishnu as something temporary, as a stepping stone. They say, let us worship Lord Vishnu, let us worship the deity of Lord Vishnu, and then by that worship, our mind will become focused, it will become steady, and will become purified. And then finally when we are purified, we can give up Lord Vishnu, and we can merge into the Brahmajyoti. This is their philosophy. I mean, that's the Panchopasana, but one of them is Lord Vishnu as well. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains that that's a tangent though. He explains the 5 Panchopasana in a different way. But anyway, Lord Vishnu is there. So, Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains that the idea is that Shankaracharya wanted his followers to worship Lord Vishnu with the idea of freeing themselves from the material world and going into Brahman. Right? So if we worship Lord Vishnu with the idea that we want mukti from this material world, then we are going to develop some attraction to Krishna, to Vishnu. Some attraction will be there. I'm suffering here in this material world. I want to go to something spiritual, whatever that may be. So therefore, let me worship Lord Vishnu. So we are developing some sort of relationship, some sort of attraction to Lord Vishnu. The only thing is that Shankaracharya didn't give the final description, the final definition of what ultimate mukti is, which is going to the Vaikuntha plans. He only gave a partial description of mukti. That's pretty much the only difference. And therefore, if you look at Chaitanya Charitamrita, we can see that Mayavadis, impersonalists, even though their philosophy is actually wrong, still they're very qualified. How? They're very austere. They don't live in societies, materialistic societies. They may take sannyas, they may live in a forest. They're following varnashram, dharma. They're vegetarians, they're following the 4 regulated principles. So in that sense, they're exactly like Vaishnavas, but just there's that little flaw in their philosophy that I want to merge into Brahman instead of worshipping Krishna and going and living with him in Vaikuntha. That's why if you see that, in one sense you can say they're like dry wood, and they just need to come in contact with that fire of Krishna consciousness, and then they immediately become great devotees. And the example is given in Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and Prakashananda Saraswati. Both of them who are impersonalists, they came in touch with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and immediately they became very great devotees actually. Compare that with someone, let's say if we're preaching to some very materialistic person, very deep into the mode of ignorance, right? And he comes into Krishna consciousness, he comes in touch with the holy name. For such a person, even though they're getting purified, it might take some time because they're addicted to all sinful habits, waking up at odd hours of the day, sleeping at odd times like that. So it may take them some time to come to follow the regulated principles of Vaishnava Dharma. But real impersonalists, they're actually already following all those external rules. So they just have to have their minds changed a little bit and understand what the real philosophy is, what real mukti is, and then immediately they can become great devotees actually. So, okay. I just wanted to speak a little bit about Madhavendra Puri actually. Speaking of personalism, impersonalism, let's see, may take 5-10 minutes. Let's see. Just a few points which I gathered from his pastime, which I read a few weeks back in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Of course, he's a personalist. He's a great Vaishnava. The funny thing was at that time, when Chaitanya Leela was going on, is that all these Vaishnava sannyasis, right, like Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, like Prabodhananda Saraswati, Brahmananda Bharati, Paramananda Puri, all these great Vaishnavas, they were actually Vaishnavas, but because there was impersonalism was rampant, especially in the Bengal area, they were forced to take sannyas in Shankar's sampradaya. So they're all ekadandi sannyasis, but actually they were, in their hearts, they were all tridandi sannyasis. They're all Vaishnava sannyasis. So Madhavendra Puri, as you know, he was there walking through Vrindavan. He was an itinerant mendicant. He was a sannyasi. He was just walking from one place to another place, sitting under one tree one night, just like the Goswamis. And then finally he sits at the base of Govardhan Hill. And he sits in front of Govinda Kund. If you have been to Vrindavan, you know the exact spot. There's Govinda Kund, and just behind, Govardhan Hill is there. And I think there's a tree there as well, where Madhavendra Puri actually sat, if I'm not mistaken. So there he was sitting, and he was chanting the whole night. But at the end of the night, when the day was coming, it's explained in Chaitanya Charitamrita that he slightly dozed off. Now, don't get fooled by that statement. Madhavendra Puri dozing off and us dozing off is completely different. If we're chanting Hare Krishna and we doze off, we fall into Maya. But when Madhavendra Puri dozes off, slightly, momentarily, while chanting Hare Krishna for the whole night, what happens? Krishna comes in his dream for that one moment. And what does Krishna say? He says, I am Gopal, and my deity is there. It's hidden in the bushes. Please rescue me from the situation and reinstall me on top of Govardhan Hill. Because of the Mughals invading, somehow what had happened is, the priests at that time, they'd taken the deity up and it had been abandoned in some bushes. And then, large vines and foliage had grown on top. So then he gets this dream, and then immediately, the next moment, he gathers together a team of devotees, and is explained. They went with knives and axes, and started to cut down all these branches. And lo and behold, Gopal was there. And then Madhavendra Puri didn't stop there. Remember, he's a sannyasi. He's just wandering here and there. He's alone. He doesn't have any friends. He doesn't keep in touch with his family. He just depends on Krishna. Still, Madhavendra Puri enlisted the help of the entire village of Govardhan Hill to install the deity of Gopal on top of Govardhan Hill. So it means that even if we reach the highest stages of bhakti, even if we may be a Paramahamsa, for where we may have the adhikar to do nirjan bhajan, that's something which Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Prabhupada also, they were greatly against that. We should never think in devotional service that now we are qualified enough to give up the association of the Vaishnavas, to give up the association of devotees, and just go to some solitary place and just chant Hare Krishna. Madhavendra Puri, he was actually qualified for that. But still, when the time came for worshipping Gopal and installing Gopal on top of Govardhan Hill, he actually went and he amassed huge support and the help of hundreds, perhaps thousands of people in Vrindavan to install Gopal. So that's the second important lesson we learn. That we should always have good relationships with other devotees. We should always serve Krishna with them. And then they performed a very elaborate festival. They installed Gopal, then he was bathed in Panchamrit. Then they got something like 100 pots of water from Govinda Kund, and then they bathed, they did an abhishek of Gopal, and it's explained there was so many brahmanas enlisted to do that, and then they also cooked a huge feast for Gopal as well. He was decorated very nicely, his body was smeared with sandalwood paste, decorated very nicely, and then finally he gave his darshan to everyone. He did this immediately the next day after Gopal was found, by the way. And that's when that whole Annakut ceremony, it starts from there basically. So when we have that Govardhan Hill festival, right, after Janmashtami, towards the end of the year, that has its origins there. Of course it has its origin in Vraja Leela, but more recently, in recent history, that's where it started actually. So then he does this, and it doesn't stop with the village of Govardhan, but all the surrounding villages, they also want to participate in this Annakut festival. So for many, many days, entire villages come and they cook huge feast and they offer it to Gopal on top of Govardhan Hill. So this continues happening. And finally, it stops after some time. And I think maybe like a month later or something like that, after installing Gopal, Gopal comes in the dream of Madhavendra Puri again for a second time. And he says, now you must go to Jagannath Puri and you must get for me camphor and sandalwood paste, because it's very hot in Govardhan Hill. You know, according to the Guinness World Book of Records, Govardhan is supposed to be or has been recorded, or was recorded to be the hottest place on earth. So naturally, Gopal was feeling hot. So he asked his devotee Madhavendra Puri to go to Jagannath Puri and get sandalwood so that it could be smeared. And actually at the end of this chapter in CC, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu glorifies Madhavendra Puri by saying he is such a great Vaishnava that the Supreme Personality of Godhead came to him in his dream 3 times. Not only that, but the Gopinath deity in Remuna stole sweet rice for Madhavendra Puri as well. And I believe he didn't steal, he got something like 80 pounds of sandalwood from Jagannath Puri. If anyone, you have a conversion thing, you can see how many kilos that is, I'm not sure. I think it's 80. But yeah, so he gets that order from Gopal, go to Puri and get the sandalwood. So he just leaves. He just leaves for Jagannath Puri. And on the way, he goes to the town, he stops by the town of Remuna, and there he sees how the people in this town are very beautifully worshipping Gopinath, the Gopinath deity which is there. And he sees that every evening the Gopinath deity is offered some beautiful kshira, some beautiful sweet rice. And he thinks to himself, it would be nice if my Gopal also got this sweet rice as well. And he thinks this before it is offered, so he says, he condemns himself and he stays outside of the temple. But here's another important point that we can learn there, that we have an Ishta Devata, right? And I would think that all the devotees here in our community, Shri Shri Radha Gopinath's community, our Ishta Devata is Shri Shri Radha Gopinath. So similarly, the Ishta Devata of Madhavendra Puri was Gopal. He personally installed him on top of Govardhan Hill. Even though Madhavendra Puri is going to a different place, he's seeing a different deity, Gopinath, he's still thinking about his Gopal. He's seeing how nicely the people in Remuna are offering this sweet rice to Gopinath, and he's thinking about his Gopal. He's saying, my Gopal should also get this. So same with us. If our Ishta Devata is Shri Shri Radha Gopinath, even if we go to any other temple, even if we are, seeing any other deity, still we should think of our Radha Gopinath. We should not forget our Radha Gopinath. In fact, we should see it that these other deities are actually expansions of my Radha Gopinath. Right? This is how we can keep that sambandha, that relationship with Radha Gopinath. So we can see that Madhavendra Puri did that. He never forgot Gopal, even though he was enchanted by the service that the devotees of the Gopinath deity in Ramuna were offering to the deity there. Then he goes to Jagannath Puri, he gets the sandalwood, he gets the camphor, and he's returning back to Vrindavan. And as explained, he went through a lot of hardships. There was a lot of bandits, thieves, toll collectors, but he didn't care. He just depended. And one more thing about Madhavendra Puri is that he never begged for food, by the way. He never begged for food. If food happened to come to him, he'll eat. Otherwise, he'll keep fasting. This was the standard, this was the Paramahamsa standard of his renunciation. So he comes back to Remuna after getting the sandalwood. And then Gopal comes to him in a dream for the third time. And what does Gopal say? He says, my dear Madhavendra Puri, because you're undergoing so much hardship carrying this sandalwood, carrying this camphor, I don't want you to continue carrying it all the way to Vrindavan. Just stay in Remuna and offer this sandalwood to Gopinath. And he says, just by you offering this sandalwood paste on the body of Gopinath, because me and Gopinath are the same, we are the same, I will experience the happiness in Vrindavan. Now we may think that it seems that Gopal is discouraging him in the relationship, right? Gopal is saying, look, I know you're doing everything for me, but actually there's no difference between myself and the Gopinath deity in Remuna. If you smear sandalwood paste on the Gopinath deity in Remuna, I will receive the benefits of that, the service of that in Vrindavan, Gopal is saying. But still, Madhavendra Puri didn't think like that. He still didn't forget his Gopal in Vrindavan. It's explained in Chaitanya Charitamrita that Madhavendra Puri stayed in Remuna until the whole sandalwood which he had brought from Jagannath Puri was used up by the pujaris. Day after day after day, month after month, to smear on the body of Gopinath. And every time it was being smeared on the body of Gopinath, he was thinking about his service to Gopal. So at no point in time should we lose our relationship with our Ishta Devata, Shri Shri Radha Gopinath. At no point in time should we think of the service of even any other deity than our Ishta Devata, Shri Shri Radha Gopinath. So that is the sambandha we must have. And I was thinking recently, and I'll finish with this. It is said that the Gopal deity, this is in the next pastime, the Sakshi Gopal pastime. The Sakshi Gopal pastime, what happens? The Gopal deity from Vrindavan, he follows the young Brahmana from Vrindavan and he goes all the way to South India. Indeed, that is a very, very great accomplishment. I mean, in terms of what Krishna did for his devotees, it's very amazing. And the Gopal deity is obviously glorified, worshipped by so many Vaishnavas. But we should not forget what our Radha Gopinath did. Our Radha Gopinath not only left Vrindavan in India, but he came all the way across the sea to a different country, to Bondi. Radha Gopinath. They came to Bondi. The devotees at that time, because of some miscommunication, did not pick up the deities, did not pick up Radha Gopinath when he came to Bondi. So Radha Gopinath was sent back to India. This is the love of Radha Gopinath. So much austerity Shri Shri Radha Gopinath have performed to come and be worshipped here in Sydney. Then when Srila Prabhupada and Vegavan Prabhu, and when they were coming to Sydney, Srila Prabhupada this time personally carried the deities in his lap. Srila Prabhupada personally brought them. First time they just came in a cargo, but the devotees didn't pick them up, so they went back. Radha Gopinath went back. This time Srila Prabhupada personally brought them in his own lap and installed them. And he said, please, Radha Gopinath, I have to go. I have to travel. I have to spread Krishna consciousness. I'm leaving you in the hands of these mlechas. Please educate them how to worship you very nicely. So I was thinking what to speak of a devotee, even if we can become a mlecha of Radha Gopinath, that is such a wonderful thing. Radha Gopinath will take care of us. Because he's been requested by his pure devotee, Srila Prabhupada. So I'll finish there. Thank you. Any quick questions, comments? Yes, Prabhu.
Who actually decides and who becomes various entities in Vaikuntha planet? Is that the desire of other planetary systems, entities they actually desire, and when they reach some...
Sir, the question is who decides?
Who decides to become like a tree? Or who decides to become like a, I don't know, a demigod or a citizen of Vaikuntha planet? Who actually gets to reach that position?
Who gets...
In Prabhupada mentions,
Yeah.
there's actually virtually no difference between the residents, the land, the animals, So who actually becomes that?
Okay, so the question is different to the context. The question is, why do some devotees become trees? Why do some devotees become animals, human beings, like that? That is, from what I understand, Prabhu, that is depending on our adhikar, and is also depending on what sort of relationship we develop with Krishna. Generally speaking, the devotees who are in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement, most likely they will be related to Krishna in Madhurya Ras. Most likely. But then obviously there are also devotees in other sampradayas who cultivate the Vatsalya relationship. So they won't become gopis, they'll become maybe Krishna's father. I mean, the young gopis, they'll become elderly residents in Vrindavan. And then explain in regards to devotees in Shantaras, for example, trees, right, the blades of grass, all these other things there, which are in Shantaras, like birds, for example, another one. They're like yogis who did meditation, and they meditated on the super soul. So they had that relationship with Krishna, but it wasn't a relationship of servitude. It wasn't dasya. It was more shanta. They meditated. They attained the perfection of Ashtanga yoga process. They got samadhi, but instead of falling for the trap of thinking that they are the super soul, they are Krishna, they understood, I am different, super soul is different, therefore they meditated on the super soul and they developed that shanta bhav. So such living entities become things like trees and stuff in the spiritual world. So it's the relationship that we develop, it's also our adhikar as well. What process we're adopting to reach the goal. Is it pure bhakti? Is it mixed bhakti? Is it the Ashtanga yoga process which is mixed with bhakti? Like that.
Which category of personalities or which category of people who follow the Shankaracharya philosophy, what is the best? You mentioned that it's like Brahman merging into the effulgence, personal effulgence of the lordships. So do they also get to reach Kailasa Dham as well?
I haven't come across a reference for that, but I've heard devotees say like that. They're not actually devotees of Lord Shiva. I mean, yes, they are. They're devotees of Shankara, but only if they follow Shankaracharya properly. Right?